Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Mills. I'm the Executive Director of GI&I, Global Innovation Institute, and I want to welcome you to our webinar today. Today is Tuesday, April 8th, 2025, and this is our April 2025 webinar. We hold these webinars monthly to help to continue to grow and expand our knowledge around innovation and transformation and leading trends in this space. And we host a number of very knowledgeable guests to be on our webinars with us and grow the overall GI&I community. So I want to welcome you to our webinar today and thank you for participating with us. What I'd like to do now is to introduce to you our guest for today and tell you a little bit about her before I turn it over to her. So our guest today is Dr. Kellee Franklin, PhD. Kellee is an esteemed global innovation and transformation leader with a passion for human potential and emerging technologies like AI. She has a proven track record of driving organizational change across government agencies, including the White House, and bringing fresh ideas to diverse Fortune 500 companies around the world. As a strategic executive advisor and innovation educator, Kellee excels at designing AI adoption strategies, fostering collaboration, and creating engaging learning experiences. In that process, she is committed to advocating for human-centered engagement, data-driven transformation, and accelerated innovation. Kellee proudly serves on global advisory boards in health, innovation, and cybersecurity, including on GI&I's advisory board. And she speaks publicly on a variety of business and leadership topics across all media formats. Kellee holds a PhD from Virginia Tech in Human Development and Organizational Behavior, and she presently resides in the Washington, D.C. area and travels worldwide to promote the promise and possibilities of human-centered practices. Today, Kellee's going to be talking to us about the rapidly evolving world of AI and its impact on the workplace. In this conversation, we'll discover key strategies for fostering a human-centric approach to AI integration as we explore such topics as empowering employees to embrace AI technologies, cultivating a culture of innovation and continuous learning, strengthening collaboration between humans and AI systems, and learning about global companies that are leveraging the human plus AI advantage. This is important to us as innovation leaders because we need to make the most of emerging AI capabilities to further streamline and accelerate our respective innovation efforts so that we remain at the forefront of relevance to our markets. So listen very carefully now as Kellee reveals her unique wisdom to us on this topic. With that, I'll turn it over to Kellee. So if you will, join me now in welcoming Dr. Kellee Franklin. Kellee, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you for such a kind and gracious welcome, Anthony. I appreciate that so much. And thank you to every single one of you who has decided to carve time out of your very busy schedules to be with us today. I know that you're coming from every corner of the globe, so I would love to first hear from you and let me know in the chat box. I know that I heard from Barbara where she's just right down the road from me. I'm currently in North Carolina, but let me know where you are dialing in from today, because I'd love to know where we are joining together on this very important topic. So please let me know where you're dialing in from today, because I'd love to hear that. So someone from Dallas, lots of good things coming from Dallas, Lebanon. Thank you all for being here. So glad that you could carve time. Saudi Arabia, Brussels, wow. Oman, welcome all of you. I think that just, you can see from the range of locations the importance of this topic. It's not just a North America topic. This is a topic that covers every single one of us. And I think you'll notice from the information that I'm going to share with you today, just the impact and the expectation that artificial intelligence will have. And I think, Anthony talked in my bio that I lean heavily on the promise and possibilities of technology. And this is something that I have been interested and curious about the entirety of my career. And that is because I believe in you and your creative potential that makes the combination of humans with artificial intelligence possible. I always like to invite when I bring groups together, especially from across the world. And I had a conversation just yesterday with a critical care nurse, and I told her about my time with you all today. And I said to her, I'm speaking with this great group of global innovators on the topic of AI. And I said, what kind of matters most to you about AI? And she shared to me some of her excitement and some of her concerns related to AI. So I'd love to take just a few moments for you all to think about the following questions. And as you feel comfortable, share with our global colleagues. How are you coming into this conversation today? How are you feeling? What are you grateful for? What do you anticipate you need? And really, what matters most to you as we explore this topic of the AI revolution and putting humans at the heart of this exciting transformation? So I'll just give you a few moments to think about those questions. Because we are entering a very exciting era. And maybe Anthony can share with me some of the things that are coming across those.
Yeah, I mean, people are saying that this is an impressive, interesting topic. They're hopeful that AI can help people work more closely together and while remaining ethical, unique, and respectful of each person's talents. I think that's something that resonates with me and you. I myself am excited about this and the opportunity to be a part of what's next. That's always what's driven me as an innovator. And my hope is that everyone will take a truly a human-centered approach to this subject, and that as a community we can share insights about how to do that.
Well, as recently as, and thank you all for thinking about those questions and sharing with me, I think we'll see more commonalities than we do differences as we kind of walk through this journey together. As recently as February of this year, J.D. Vance, the United States Vice President, talked about the revolutionary era that we're beginning and talked about the applications of AI and how it's going to change every industry. And that has resulted in a tremendous amount of investment from the United States of America. And if we look at the statistics across all aspects of markets and industries, we can see the impact that is predicted. And as I mentioned, and as Anthony articulated in my bio, I lean on possibilities and promise. So I've highlighted two of those for you, which are really related to the tremendous amount of predictability in jobs that will result in AI, and also the growth in our global economy. Oftentimes, people talk about the doomsday related to AI. I look at the tremendous possibility, and I think that each one of you on this call indicates the tremendous possibility that lies ahead as being agents of innovation related to AI. However, I do think that we need to, as agents of innovation, need to consider what Fascal Hoke writes about as recently as April 6th on his LinkedIn page. AI presents a tremendous amount of convenience, but are we at that cross bridge of deciding between convenience or humanity? And I think it's important as leaders who are exploring this topic, what are we deciding between? And I think that there is an opportunity that we can do both. So these are the questions we're going to explore today in our conversation. How can we empower employees to embrace AI technologies? How can we cultivate a culture of innovation and continuous learning? How might we strengthen collaboration between humans and these technologies? And how might we learn from and apply successful human and AI strategies used by global companies? A quote that I love from the Microsoft CEO really, I think, embraces what we need to do as leaders. We can no longer be the expert in the room. We really have to embrace the concept of being a learning leader. So much is changing so fast, and we can't possibly know everything. We have to go in with a child's eyes of wonderment and be able to bring along other people and be open and receptive to new ideas and new possibilities and be a learn-it-all, which is a great mindset, which is, you probably have heard the term a growth mindset for us to embrace as we journey down this path. So what does that mean? There are really some fundamental truths that we know from psychology and adult learning about people and change. One, change is constant. It's happening all the time and all around us. Two, people for the most part don't like sudden change. And oh, by the way, when it's related to technology, for certain, they don't like change that's imposed on them or withheld from them. And each one of us on this call has a different response to change. And oh, by the way, that can also happen during different periods of time in our life when we have different things happening in our lives. But there's an interesting concept called law of diffusion, and I don't know how many of you have been exposed to it. But there are a number of us who are innovators and who are willing to step out ahead and who are willing to try things. And if we can find those people across our organizational systems who will lead the way and try things, then there are those early adopters who will follow suit. And it's that 2.5% to 13.5% that you need to get on board that really create the wave of change to get the early and late adopters. There's always going to be people that are going to be resistant to change, no matter whether it's an organizational system or any other community-based change. But it's really getting those people who are inspired by and excited by AI technologies within your system to get them to get on board. But one of my favorite quotes related to change and transformation and innovation came from the Intel co-founder. He talked about we need to get people's heads connected with their hearts so their feet will walk. And I really think that that encapsulates what we know to be true about transformation and change management. You have to connect people's heads with their hearts or their feet will walk. Well, what does that really mean? What does that really mean for us? Why does connecting people's hearts matter when we are talking about AI adoption and integration? Well, this has been studied. I tend to gravitate towards a 1986 study by McMillan and Chavez, who looked at the sense of community in organizations, because I used it as my dissertation research related to how technology was going to impact human relations in the workplace. And they found that there were 4 elements that were critical to creating a sense of community. But these are just as relevant today as we are talking about integrating the sophisticated technology in our workplaces. They've expanded now to consider these other 5 additional things. So let me show you how these can work. So we need to have shared values and mutual respect. We need to have specific needs of different user groups known and recognized. We need to build emotional bonds across our organizations. We need to encourage collaboration and knowledge sharing. And we need, as leaders, those agents of innovation, to establish clear goals and values and have those strong leaders and role models to demonstrate across our organizational systems. Unfortunately, in many organizations that I work with who have said, we've implemented AI, but nobody's using it. Today, the statistics show that about 4% of organizations who've implemented AI into their organizations find that their employees are using it to the extent that they should. 4%. And it's often because they have overlooked the human element that is critical for AI adoption and integration. So let's talk about, what does success look like for navigating the AI revolution? And it is those critical human elements that I have found to be fundamental, whether it be AI, whether it be ERP implementation, or any other kind of technology, to be quite honest with you. And I try to make it very simple so that we remember it. Those three elements are engage, educate, and empower. And I'm going to talk about each one of these. I'm going to provide you with an example, and then I'm going to leave you with a question for you to consider for your own organization. So the first one, engagement. Engagement creates understanding. Every single one of us on this call has a different and beautiful way in which they see the world, which is an amazing thing. We can come together from our different vantage point and look at a problem and see possibilities, which is an amazing thing. And Jeff Bezos, I love this quote. He talks about that today's world is so complex and so complicated that we have to be in this continuous state of reinvention. Back to Satya Nadale's quote that we have to be learners. We have to be continuous learners. And bringing different people from different perspectives together helps us to see what we might not see if we have the same type of people together looking at a particular problem, and the diversity in thinking. So let me give you this example. Doug Dietz was an engineer who worked at GE Healthcare. He was one of the developers for the MRI machine in a pediatric hospital. He was deeply upset when he found out that children were refusing to go to their appointments because they were scared of the big, spooky machine. He had heard about the Stanford Design School in California, and he went to go take the course on design thinking. He was so inspired by the collaborative approach that he learned at the Stanford Design School that he went back to GE and he brought together different people from different parts of the hospital system to include the children and to include designers from Disney. And these are some of the concepts that he came up with. From a business perspective, it resulted in pediatric patients, not only meeting their visits, but actually proactively seeking out to go to additional visits, which meant that they met their health outcomes. But from a business perspective, it helped to streamline visits, and it also helped them meet bottom line numbers. So it was a win from a patient perspective, but it was a win also from a business perspective by using a collaborative and ideation process. So what does that mean in the world of AI? AI increases the personalization because we have access to patient data, and we can integrate systems that are in place to make sure that we're personalizing for every single one of you on this call and to create a better outcome for each one of us. So the question for us, and I used Jeannie's logo there in the middle, but you can put your own company logo in the middle. As AI agents of innovation, how might we always be thoughtful about inviting different perspectives to reimagining possibilities? How might we always be thoughtful about inviting different perspectives to reimagining possibilities? So let's look at the second one. Educate. Education inspires transformation. The exciting thing about the world that we live in now is that data is everywhere. So if you look at the statistics that I've showed you here, that goes up to 2018, and it just shows you the expectation and the use of data that was available. If you can imagine what those statistics are to date and look at the average smartphone usage, we have data everywhere. And that gives us a window into every single one of us behavioral patterns. And so that data helps us to understand people like never before. It also encourages us, data is one aspect, right? When we have quantitative data, it also encourages us to go out and talk to people, because what I always say is oftentimes what the quantitative data says doesn't often tell the whole story. So I always encourage you to go out and talk to people and really understand from a narrative. But what we can learn from is different parts of the system, getting to that qualitative aspect, might tell different parts of the story. And in socialized decision making, and Walmart does an exceptional job at this, is they bring different parts of their data collection together so that they can not only improve the customer experience, but they can improve the people who work inside Walmart's experience. And they can also improve how they negotiate contracts and every other part of the department's experiences. They are probably one of the leading, believe it or not, most people are surprised by this, one of the leading retail organizations around AI technology. And it's because they recognize we can no longer work in stovepipes and silos if we want to be innovative about creating the best possible experience for our shoppers, for our employees, and for downstream with our contract negotiations. And this is called socialized decision making, bringing different parts of the pieces together to make decisions. So what does this mean for us as agents of innovation? How might we enhance our employee and customer experiences by listening to varied data streams and integrating these lessons learned? And I think that integrating the lessons learned is very important. Listening is key, but making sure that when we hear what these varied data streams are doing and saying, that we're integrating and giving feedback into the system and making changes and adjustments. The third one, and I think this one is so important in the world that we're talking about now, empowerment. Empowerment accelerates innovation. I love this example because I had the chance to work with the foundation and a partnering foundation. It's a human-centered design toolkit that, rather than being designed by a bunch of super smart consultants in Seattle, Washington, United States, the consultants went to the continent of Africa and worked directly with the farmers to design a toolkit and techniques to make sure that the farmers' needs would be at the heart of this how-to guide on how to do farming best practices. And when I offer this as an example, I say to audiences, why would it be better that a bunch of super smart consultants went and actually asked the farmers about farming in Africa than spend their time just researching farming in Seattle, Washington? And I bet each one of you probably knows the answer to that. You know, what do a bunch of Seattle, Washington people know about farming in Africa, right? So adoption of this toolkit was substantially higher because they involved the people that were actually going to use the tool in the process of creating it. They empowered the people in the design process. And that is so important to the work we're doing around AI. Sadly, what I have found often when I go and work with organizations, they say, oh, we found this cool AI tool, we just basically launched it. Or, oh, we found this really cool AI tool, we don't think our people are going to understand it, so we're going to hold it back. So they're either imposing it on people or they're withholding it from people. And as you can see, hopefully from some of the things I've shared with you, imposing it and withholding it is not engaging, not educating, or empowering people, which is counter to the psychology that we understand about human behavior. So how does empower translate to how organizations are doing this within their human systems? IBM and Watson Education, some of you may be familiar with, has designed an AI-empowered learning platform, which tailors their learning experiences. Again, back to kind of my earlier comments about AI has the data now that understands how Anthony learns, how Kellee learns, how Barbara learns, how each one of you learns, so they can adapt the learning platform and can provide the type of learning related to not only how you learn, but the types of information and education that you need for your particular job, and also can track your progress and performance and can accelerate your learning curve. So let's say that you want to move from job A to job C. It knows the types of knowledge skills that you need to get there, but also knows where you currently are so that you can get there. So rather, historically, as most of us know who have worked in human systems, learning and development was a one-stop shop and everybody kind of went through the same type of programming. Now, they're recognizing that AI can be a powerful tool because it can adapt and adjust for each and every one of us. Some of us are visual learners, some of us adapt, auditory, and so on and so forth. And this is a great advancement with AI technologies. So as AI agents of innovation, How might we learn and apply lessons from other industries to improve our ability to continuously learn, adapt to market demands, drive innovation, and accelerate growth? So, what I've done through the work that I've had the good fortune of with different organizational systems, those concepts that I've presented to you, my deep understanding of human systems and organizational behavior, I've created a model that encapsulates those ideas into one holistic model. Because I think when you're more holistic, you're more humanistic, which I think is what gets back to Fascal Hoke's point. We can choose between convenience or being embracing humanity, or in my view, we can do both and that is how can we personalize, integrate, socialize, and accelerate so that we're also keeping our eye on humanity, keeping things humane. And an example I like to share is MetaSafe, which is an organization that got a $350 million investment from AWS to develop its patient-centered platform. And it, in my view, embraces each one of those ideas and concepts where it personalizes, it integrates with existing support systems and communication so it can continuously give patients treatment journeys that are specific to them. It socializes by connecting patients and caregivers and other things that are available to them. And it also accelerates by creating an omni-channel, multi-channel, and accelerates them on their progress performance. So MetaSafe is one example that introduces AI in a more holistic framework and integrates all of the aspects that I've presented to you on the previous slides. And I think this is kind of a both and. It creates convenience for the user, and it also really keeps the patient, in this case, at the center of the design. And if you can imagine that, going back to the example I gave you around Doug Dietz, when you put the patient or the user at the center of the design, the likelihood is they're going to use it more, they're going to get more out of it. And in this particular case, related to health, their health outcomes are going to benefit greater. And from a business perspective, if a patient is using the health application more, it's going to benefit the business significantly more because the health outcomes are greater, which is a win-win for everybody. So I always like to suggest at the end of something like this, what does that mean for us as agents of innovation? As I introduced you to the law of diffusion, it requires us to go out in the world and be an agent of innovation and to inspire other agents of innovation. They're out there. Believe me, Anthony's a great example of one, right? Muhammad, my friend in Dubai, great example of one. And we need you to be an agent of innovation because once you shine your light, you'll get those early adopters, and that just sparks other ideas and other people to come on board to adoption and integration of these great technologies. So what does that mean for us? You know, how might we effectively leverage data and machine learning to create personalized experiences for not only our customers, but our employees, while also being extremely sensitive to privacy and ethical standards? With integration, how might we ensure that these AI technologies complement and enhance the existing systems and business operations? People have put a lot of time, energy, and effort to creating existing systems. There's a lot of information and data already available. Rather than stripping and taking those down, how might we take advantage of what's already available and just amplifying and enhancing it? Socialization, in what ways can we promote collaboration and knowledge sharing? We learn when we interact and bump up against one another. So how can we promote that among not only AI systems, but almost even more importantly, each other and other technologies so that we can drive innovation and accelerate growth? And acceleration, which is what I think the majority of us on this call probably are about, like, thinking about, driving to the moon or Mars. How might we foster cultures of continuous learning and adaptability to help our human systems navigate the rapidly evolving AI landscape? And so what I hope has resonated for you in our time together. AI is the latest technology. They're already talking. AI has been around a long time. For those of you who follow technology, AI is actually, for those of who've worked in and around AI, they consider it almost a dated technology, and they're already on to quantum computing. What in all of my years of consulting, the one thing that has never changed is the human heart. So I want to encourage every one of you to remember that you are the instrument of change. You are the important aspect in all of this. And Pema Chodron, who's an American Buddhist monk, says, "You are the sky, everything else is just the weather." Sometimes I'll talk about you're the mountain, everything else is just the weather. So what does that mean? You're probably like, what does that mean? In my view, as you move and advance in your career, these technologies are going to take care of a lot of repetitive tasks, which is a great thing, I think. We are going to need human-centered, conscious leaders. And so I call on each and every one of you to make sure you're strengthening those muscles. AI is going to be a great way for us to get rid of things that may have been in somewhat an annoyance. But let's strengthen our ability to connect, true connectivity with one another. So how do we do that? Awareness and transformation starts with us. And once we build those self-awareness skills, it transfers to our teams and our workplace and extends out to our global friends. So I encourage each one of us to think about these very human aspects of this topic, because the technology will continue to change and evolve. And it's going to be on each one of us to stay grounded in the human, the humane, the humanity aspects of all of this. So I want you to be inspired, be inspiring. You never know what kind of conversation or comment will inspire another person to step into this. We need each and every one of you. I love this quote by Owen Waters. In a universe created by infinite being, each one of us has, by design, infinite possibilities. Here are some resources for you to consider I mentioned earlier Transcend by Fascal Hogue, who's a friend of Jeannie, and two books that I've used in my graduate teaching with a global international business school. The Mind of the Leader, which talks about the self-awareness skills that I mentioned. And that same group just released More Human, which focuses specifically on the topic that we talked about today. And because I believe in community and learning from each one of you, I'd love to stay connected. So please reach out to me. Let's learn, let's do this together, let's explore this amazing topic. I appreciate your time. I hope this was insightful for you, and I'd love to entertain your questions.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and it's been a wonderful presentation. We do have a lot of questions in the chat screen. I don't know if you want to pop that open and look at it, but I can certainly recall some of those for us and let you address each of them in turn. So we started with some questions from Walid Nima. His questions are the following. His first questions. How long do you think agentic AI will be really useful in enterprise and businesses? Um, let's start with that question. I don't know how in
Uh,
depth you are with agentic AI.
yeah,
Thoughts?
I actually think it will, it's been talked about that it will probably be around for quite some time. Just because of the nature of as things are shifting within organizational systems. That's actually one of the things that I've heard is people are not allowing employees to play with. I'm actually kind of an advocate for. Um, I think that much like a pilot has a co-pilot, I think that as organizational systems, human systems, I like to call them, are becoming more and more dispersed, uh, and our direct supervisors, managers, whatnot, aren't readily available to guide us, much like a co-pilot in an airplane. I think that those are important for us to have. Anthony, I don't know if you want to.
Well, agentic AI is a newer evolution of some of the other more generic AI tools that are in place, and I think it's somewhat of an evolution of what's called RPA, robotic process automation,
Yeah,
but it's taking that to the next level. The issue I've heard is a lot of the agentic AI tools in the market right now, they break easily. So
yeah.
at some point, like they quit being able to navigate websites and things like that. So Amazon just released a new platform, I forget what it's called, where they specifically tried to address that basic issue with the agentic AI by breaking it down into more simple chunks and um, I forget the word I'm using, but really sort of encapsulate those in a different way and make them so that the agentic AI tools can work get better and not break so easily. So I think that's kind of where we are in the maturity level and the learning curve of agentic AI. That's a nut that will get cracked eventually, and
Yeah.
they'll figure out how to get a system that works right without breaking so easily. I think once that really starts to happen, and I don't think that's happened yet, but I think it's just around the corner. I think once that starts to happen, I think agentic AI has a huge amount of promise and potential, again, for helping us. It's that convenience thing, but it's also convenience for the sake of improving our humanity. In fact, I just wrote a book last year called Designing the Human Business, which you're familiar with, and a lot of the case study is a fictitious company, but it's doing an agentic AI system, and the whole point of the system is to help us improve our lives holistically, um, by doing what an agentic AI can do. So when the tools get to where they work well, there's a lot of promise for them.
I mean, that's kind of the way I feel. And just
Yeah.
back to my point that, we live and work within dispersed worlds now. And, it used to be very hierarchical systems, right? And I think that these agentic tools allow us, I think, to actually work more productively in many respects because each one of us has a co-pilot rather than you may have one supervisor for 10 plus employees. So I think that they can be used, you're going to have glitches all the time. But my hope is that they learn quite quickly. And my friends in the quantum computing world say as soon as quantum computing is integrated with Agenix, we're going to see a whole different type of landscape.
Yeah. So the next question that Waleed had was dealing with privacy. It's like, unless the
Mm.
privacy is addressed adequately, that's going to limit the usefulness of AI. What's your thought about the whole privacy issue?
Well, I think that's a great question. Um, we didn't share the entirety of my background, but I can tell you that I began and spent many years of my career in defense and intelligence. So I can tell you a lot of my passion around these technologies are because I've spent many years in defense and intelligence. So I lean heavily around the promise and possibilities because I recognize that um, these tech, because I know what these technologies can do and put in the hands of the wrong people, I know what they can do, if that makes sense. So I tend to believe very optimistic and hope that they get in the hands of the right people. So I do think that it requires, again, the agents of innovation and people who have good hearts that are using them because they are powerful tools. And so I do think we need to be very thoughtful and mindful. My view has always been to the empowerment piece of my presentation. The more we can empower each one of us to have more responsibility over our data, the better we are equipped to handle the privacy issues. I think anytime we hand that over to a larger entity, I do think we have to have guardrails for sure that are, sponsored, government sponsored. Um, but I think, again, back to being human centered, I think the more that we can allow individuals to drive that. But, we can go back. I mean, I could talk about this a lot, and I don't want to take this off into a different direction. Facebook was allowed to get away with a lot because they were like, oh, well, we had everybody sign a privacy, disclosure. Well, most people didn't read that privacy disclosure, right, when they signed up for Facebook. Um, so there's a lot of interesting conversation around privacy in these tools and technologies. Um, I just want to say that because many people don't understand um, AI, the onus is on all of us who do understand that education piece to get out in the forefront, regularly communicate with our employees. It doesn't have to be a flood of information. What I try to encourage leaders to do is just drip, 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 constant weekly tutorials, to talk about the promise and possibilities, to include ethical standards, to include privacy issues, to include all of those. I remember I talked to just kind of a side story here. Talked to an HR executive, and I said, "So what's been coming up with you and your organization about HR?" And she said, "Well, an employee came to me and said they were worried that HR was going to take their job." And I said, "Well, what'd you say?" She said, I told them, she was like, "Oh, don't worry about your job. I don't know anything about AI." So we don't want that to be the response.
Yeah. You know, I kind of look at it too. Like, you're always going to have good actors. You're always going to have bad actors. You're going to have people in the middle, the gray, like the Facebooks and Meta,
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I mean, on one hand, we need guardrails from governments to help set the tone and set the rules. but of course, the bad actors don't abide by those. So that kind of leaves us to the good actors trying to use the technology to work against bad actors. It's parallel to in the back in the late 1980s when personal computers were starting to come about. All of a sudden, you started hearing about viruses and bad actors writing viruses to steal information and things like that. So then we got antivirus software, and every year there were more sophisticated viruses, and then there was more sophisticated antivirus software. It's always been a game of one-upsmanship. I think the same thing happens with AI and any technology. You're going to have good actors, you're going to have bad actors, and it's a game of constant, ongoing one-upsmanship of keeping things in check and working with government and legal systems to try to enforce laws, but using the technology as well. I mean,
Yeah. And I
I think that's
think
the
to,
reality.
yeah, and I think to that slide that I showed you all, what was it, slide 3, about the
Mhm.
statistics
Mhm.
and the number of jobs that are going to be created related to AI. I'd be curious to know how many of those jobs could be related to cybersecurity AI. I mean, Anthony knows this. I was doing cybersecurity before cybersecurity became such a hot job area. But so, yeah, I'm glad I'm glad that you asked the question because it means that you all are thinking about it, which is great. And I can tell you the number one deterrent for these sorts of things is every one of you within an organizational system, back to my slide related to the Macmillan and Chavez um, research, is being a leader and a role model. If every one of you within your human system creates an environment where you're creating ethical standards, you're demonstrating through your own leadership and by creating role models and these agents of innovation, you're just going to create a human system that that's just not acceptable, right?
Yeah. And Waleed also commented that AI does not replace humanness. Of course it doesn't. So
Yeah.
how can we shift the focus to that while letting AI be what's good for it? I think that's the subject we have just addressed in this webinar. And Barbara commented, I don't know how much training or how to issue for staff members related to using or not using or underutilizing AI. I think that's important. Some of you may be aware, but there was just a memo leaked from the CEO, I think it was Spotify, about how they're approaching AI in the organization. And the key point was, there's a lot of learning to be happening, to happen here, and we want you to experiment and try different things and share your learnings with each other. So I think that's the approach that most organizations should be taking is, let's go explore these use cases of AI and experiment with things and learn, and let's share that with each other, and it's going to be a collective learning experience. It's synonymous to what the internet was 30 years ago. There was a big shift when Microsoft said, hey, everything's about internet now, and everyone in the company shifted to internet. And that's happening now with AI. It's about AI, and everyone's shifting to AI. But just like it was 30 years ago with the internet, how do we use the internet? Well, how do we use it effectively and productively? The same thing is happening now. It's a learning experience for organizations. How we
Yeah,
do that. So
yeah.
I think there's a lot of training.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It kind of goes back to why I shared that Satya Nadella quote, right? Be a learn it all. And tremendous amount of fear has been placed on AI, and there a lot of it, I can understand. Um, and that has caused the reaction of, okay, we're going to impose this technology or we're going to withhold the technology. And I went through, much like what Anthony talked about, some of these technologies that came forward in organizational systems. So I've been through the imposing and the withholding technologies before, but there is something to liberating people with these technologies and creating avenues for them to share. Because when you allow this liberation, that's when innovation happens, right? And back to what I shared with you all earlier, no innovation happens without change, and no change happens without real learning. And you have to allow people to come together. And I can tell you, in a client organization that I work with, a big energy company, and I know I have some energy people on this call. Um, they were hiring for a key position, and they asked for both candidates to create a presentation. And one candidate did their entire presentation in collaboration with AI, and the other candidate did a traditional presentation. And the client organization I worked with was so impressed with the candidate that collaborated with AI, not necessarily because the content was so different, but because the candidate was willing to take a risk and try and had been creative in collaborating with the technology and was going to be able to bring that insight and that innovation and that energy to the organization. So, it's less about being right and more about the playing and the trying and like let's see about the promise and the possibilities, which we've brought up several times on this conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and another question, there's a lot of questions here. It's like some of these are very
It's
interesting questions.
exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. Walid also asked the question, what about the idea of an AI digital twin for every child that gets born? Like, well, that has a lot of potential for like, if I can take my DNA data and put it into a digital twin of myself, it can predict everything about me for my whole life. It kind of takes the fun of life out sometimes though, but there's pros and cons to that. I don't know if you have any.
Maybe a digital babysitter.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
that would be better. I don't know.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I agree with you.
yeah.
Again, part of what makes us human is the unpredictability, right?
Mhm.
Which makes it so beautiful and so
Yeah,
amazing. And one of the reasons why I like working with client systems, people ask me, don't you get kind of bored? You go into these client systems and aren't people kind of the same? And I said, actually, I said, there is such beauty and such diversity within each organizational system I go in. And that's why I invite and encourage you to go out and just have these conversations like I did with the critical care nurse that I spoke with before today's conversation. Just say, what are your thoughts on AI? You
mhm,
might be surprised. You might find people are like, oh, yeah, I use it all the time. Or someone saying, oh, I'm just scared that it's going to replace my job. Or it runs across the continuum. And having these conversations will help you as a leader be better able to navigate the AI revolution in a heart-centered way.
mhm.
And that's one of the most effective things. I was fortunate enough, my leader early in my Booz Allen career was an intelligence officer from the United States Air Force, still very good friends with her today. And one of the most effective ways that she led was that she went around and did walkabouts and did, these check-ins and to find out. And this is the same thing you can do today with your key employees is just how you doing? What are you thinking about this? I just was on this webinar about the AI revolution, keeping people at the center. What do you think?
Yeah. And, I think one last kind of comment, I have a couple, but one last comment from the audience is like, uh, you know, Abraham Mazzari pointed out, what if someone created a firm or an app that was fully operated by AI agents for doing marketing, finance, updated learning for other AI agents to cope with changes? This thing runs 24 hours, on automation. I'm like, I personally think that will happen, that there will be whole companies and apps and firms that run with just AI agents. But the thing to remember in all of that is who are they serving? And who they serving is the human being. And as long as they are serving humanity, we always have to understand humans. That's where human-centered design still has a big role to play.
Yeah.
Even the AI agents have to understand what makes humans tick, what makes them who they are, and uniquely human, the messiness of humanity. So as long as that's who we're serving, as long as we're serving humans, everything has to be attuned to humanity.
That's exactly right. I often will begin presentations, live presentations. I could have done it today that says, how many of us work in organizations that are not comprised of humans? And much to Anthony's point, all of us still today, might not be in the future, but all of us today still work within organizations comprised of humans. And until that changes, we have to be cognizant that we work and live within human systems. And I use that language specifically to remind us that that's who we have the privilege to work in service of.
Yeah. I want to share one thing real quick too. You mentioned several books, but hopefully you're seeing this on my screen here. This is a
Yeah.
new book that's about to come out. It's not out yet, but it's another great resource. I think it's from a gentleman named Christian Krome, and it's called AI, the Human Story, What It Means to Be Humans When Machines Do the Thinking. And he says, for countless generations, our cognitive intelligence has been humanity's defining trait, the unique selling proposition that sets us apart from every other species. It's what enabled us to weave the fabric of society, forge cultures, create languages, and innovative technologies that have transformed our world. But now we stand at a critical tipping point. With the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence, machines are beginning to rival and may soon surpass our intellectual capabilities. What happens when our most significant differentiator is no longer exclusive of us? As AI begins to think for us, we're compelled to ask what defines us moving forward. So I think that's the question I want to leave us all with. What defines us moving forward? I think it's the humanity part, and as capable as AI may become cognitively, it will never, as I understand it, be truly an emotional being like we are. So I think the emotional and the spiritual part of humanity is what sets us apart, not the cognitive part. And there will always be this AI and human combination story.
Well, and kind of to add to that, Anthony, I told a friend of mine recently, AI is never going to embrace you when you get a good win on the ball field. They're never going to sit by you as you grieve a loved one,
Right.
right? That's and those are important elements
Yeah,
in human systems that we don't really talk about.
it is. So
So,
it's a little bit past the top of the hour. We need to kind of wrap it up. Kellee, do you have any final parting comments to wrap up this session?
well, I want to thank you, Anthony, for the invitation, and I want to thank every single one of you for your time and for your leadership because this evolution, is going to require every single one of your lights. And it was an honor for me to share time with you, and I hope to hear from you. And let's go out and make this a fantastic and amazing new world for every one of us, wherever you are in this corner of our shared society.
All right. Thank you so much, Kellee. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone here and your participation in our webinar. And for those who watch the recording, feel free to reach out to us or feel free to reach out to Kellee. And we look forward to staying in touch. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.